Today I'm going to show you how to create this cool landing page in HTML and CSS. We have this cool image at the left and we have those informations at the right. Here we have buttons that also change the color once we hover. We have those information cards and we also have a cool hover effect for our navigation bar. In addition, we have those cool social icons at the left bottom. So let's get started. So let's get started by creating our index.html file, and inside of this index.html file we're going to generate a basic template. Our website title is going to be Rocket, for example, and we subdivide our body into a header as well as a main section and a footer at the bottom. Now we're going to save the website and we're going to open our website with the live server, and now our website is basically still empty. So we're going to create a style shield with the name style.css, and we link the style shield to our index.html file by using link:/CSS, which links our style shield. So now let's go to our style shield and use the universal selector to give our document a margin of 0, a padding of 0, and box sizing of border box. Now we are also going to target the header, and our header should basically have a width of 100%, a height of 100 viewport height, and we are also going to use a background, and the background color is basically inside of this info.txt file. We're going to copy this code, this hash code, and we use this one for our background color. Now we are going to save the document and we'll open our page and we have this background. So let's get started by styling our navigation bar inside of the header, and we are going to start by using the nav element, and inside of this nav element we create an anchor tag, and the first anchor tag should be our home page. Then we will also have about, we are going to have a services section, and we are going to have a contact section. Now we're going to save the document, and right now it basically looks like this, which is obviously terrible. So we are going to style our navigation bar. First of all, we go into our style shield. We are going to create a class that has the name .text-color, which will be the text color that we are going to use for the text. And I'm going to copy this text color also from our info.txt file, like so, and I'm going to paste it after color in there. So now we have a text color. I'm also going to use going to create the class of _none, and we'll define the style text decoration of none right here. So I'm going to use _none and text-color to create the text color and the text decoration for my anchor text. So I'm going to say class equals _none and text-color. And now our anchor tag should have the desired color and also the desired underline. Maybe we can also use .bold, which should create font weight of bold, and we are going to use font-md, .font-md as a class, which will have a font size of 20 pixels. We are also going to create .font-lg, which will have a font size of maybe 30 pixels. We are also going to incorporate a different font family, which will be Roboto. So we're going to Google Fonts and search for Roboto. Roboto is going to be the font that we are going to use. So we're going to click on Get Font to get the font. Obviously, we now need to click on Get Embed Code. And now we're going to copy this style shield and insert those links into our header of our index.html file. We're going to save it. So now we are able to use the font family Roboto. And now we can use the font family Roboto for our entire body by defining this inside of our style shield by saying body gets the font family of Roboto. Now our fonts should basically all have the font family of Roboto, as you can see right here. Obviously this still doesn't really look too good, so I'm also going to use font-md and bold to take a look at it. And now you can see it's slightly bigger and also has a different font family and a different font weight. But actually I think bold doesn't really look too good, so I'm going to remove this. Also I'm going to use capital letters for this, and now it looks like this, which is a lot better in my opinion. I'm also probably going to create letter spacing, and I'm going to use letter spacing of maybe 0.4 characters. and I'm going to copy this class and use this class for our anchor tag as well. But maybe it is a little bit too much, so I'm going to go with 0.2, or I'm going to test it. Still not perfect, 0.1 probably, and yeah, looks a lot better to me. Still not perfect, but I think we can test this later on. So I'm going to copy this class right here and going to give the same class to all of the other anchor tags to have the exact same effect. And now I'm also going to write those ones in capital letters, services and contact. We're going to save it, and now it looks like this. Obviously still not perfect, so we're going to use a flex box right now. We're going to say let's use .flex to create a display of flex. Let's create a class that has justify minus center to create justify content of center, and let's create a class of gap minus 2 to create a gap of 20 pixels. So now let's use the class flex justify center and gap minus 2 for our navbar, and now we have our items centered and inside of a flex box. So this looks a lot better already. Obviously there's still not enough space to the top, and I think we can create a margin on the y-axis by using .my minus 2 to create a margin top of 20 pixels and a margin bottom of 20 pixels. And now we are going to see how this basically looks by using my2. And this should probably be padding instead of margin. That was my bad. So we're going to use padding right here and padding bottom as well. And now we're going to replace my with py, and we should get this effect. And this already looks a little bit better. Maybe there's still not enough space, so I'm probably even going to try P3 of 30 pixels, and I'm also going to add P4 in case we are going to need P4 later on, or in case we want to test P4 as well. And I think I'm actually even going to test Py minus 4 first of all. And this is probably a little bit too much, so I'm going to go with Py3. And I think this looks kind of right. Actually, I'm maybe even going with Py4, and if it doesn't look too good later on, I'll just change that. Also, for the gap, I'm probably going to add .gap minus 4 to have a gap of 40 pixels, because I think this could actually look pretty good. And I'm going to use gap 4 here, and now we basically have this style. Maybe gap 4 is still not enough. Maybe I'm actually even going to try something completely different, like gap minus 8, and we're going to use 80 pixels here, because this is like really a lot, but maybe this looks pretty good, especially on desktop device. And I think this is actually kind of right, so I'm going to go with this design. So now we want our rocket at the left, and we want our information about the page at the right, so basically heading and so on. So let's go and do that. Right below our navbar, we are going to create another div, and inside of this div, we have one div that includes our image, and our image is going to be the rocket. So we're going to go into our images folder and we select rocket.jpg. And now we're going to create a second div, and for now, I'm just going to use an h1 that says learn rocket science, for example. So now we have this giant rocket at the left, and this one is right here at the bottom, which is obviously not what we're looking for, but we can change this in a second. And in order to do so, we are going to create a class that will be the class of grid, and we're going to create a class that has grid minus auto. And now we're going into the style sheet to create those classes, and I'm going to say .grid is basically just going to set display to grid, while .grid minus auto is going to create grid template columns. I'm going to repeat as many times as it's basically needed, so I'm going to use autofit to decide this automatically. And now I'm going to use min max. The minimum width for a column should be 250 pixels, and the maximum width is basically 1 fr. So if you have space, take up 1 fr of the available space. Otherwise, once you get below 250 pixels, just get the item in the next row basically. So now we have those items aligned next to each other, but the rocket is obviously way too big, so I'm going to create a .rocket class to say we want to have a width of maybe 500 pixels for our rocket. On our desktop device. Obviously, when we use another device, we probably have to use media queries to adjust the width. And maybe 500 pixels is just not enough, so I'm probably going to go with 800 pixels for a desktop device. And as you can see, I think this looks actually pretty cool. So I'm going to use that one. So now I'm going to go into our index.html, and I'm probably just going to replace this with learn science. And now it looks like this. And obviously, maybe I want to have a different type of text, a different font size. So I'm actually also going to add dot font minus XL, which will have a font size of 40 pixels. And I'm also going to add dot font minus XXL, which is going to have a font size of 80 pixels. And now I'm probably going to use a class of font minus XXL, and I'm going to take a look at it, and I'm going to save the document XXL instead of XLL. And now we have this effect. Probably I'm going to try a different kind of font size, font weight. And instead of using bold, I'm going to create dot thin, and I'm going to use font weight of lighter. Now I'm going to add this class to our h1 and see how this looks. And now we have this effect. Maybe instead of thin, I'm going to use 300 though. So now it looks like this. Let's go with 400. 400 should be normal. Okay, that's still not perfect, so I'm going to go maybe with 600. Okay, that's probably not thin anymore. I'll just keep 300. And I'm also going to create another style that has the font size semi-bold, which is going to be 600. And I think for our heading, I'm going to create semi-bold. And I'm also going to use the color, which is text minus color for the text. And now we have this effect. And in my opinion, this looks pretty much alright. So we are now going to create some buttons and some more text. But first of all, I want to add to our grid classes, I want to create .grid minus center, and I will use place items center. And now I'm going to use .grid center, and I'm going to use this class for our grid to center our items in the center of each cell. So if this is a cell, it will take this item and center it in the middle of the cell. So we're going to save this. And as you can see, our items are now centered. And this is exactly what I was looking for. So the next step would probably also to use some more margin at the top right here. So that is something I'm going to create as well. So I'm going to use mt-8 to create a margin top of 80 pixels. And I'm going to use mt8 for our entire grid class. So I'm going to use mt8 right here. So it looks like this. In addition to this, I'm also going to create w-80, and I'm going to generate this class, and I'll say .w-80 is going to define a width of 80%. And now let's go into our index.html, and I'm going to center those 80% instead of a flex box. So this box basically takes up 80% of the available space. And by saying this has a class of flex and justify of center, I'm saying that those 80% are going to be centered in the middle of the page, like so. I think my rocket is also slightly, maybe a little bit too big. So I'm just going to go down there, and I'm going to say let's go with 600 pixels, or maybe 700. 600 is a little bit too small, and I think this looks pretty much alright, so we are going to use that one. Maybe 750. Come on. Yeah, this looks pretty good to me. So now at the right side I want to have some more text, and this text should basically be thin. So I'm going to use an h2 right below our h1, and I'm going to say learn, or the fastest way to learn anything about science. And now I'm going to use a class of thin. I'm going to use thinner for this one, and I'm going to use maybe a font size of either large or medium. This one was think. So I'm going to use thin right here. Going to save this one. Okay, I changed this one to 300 and now it seems to work. So maybe the font is a little bit too small, so we can probably try font minus MD and take a look, and this is even smaller, so we're going to use font minus LG for a larger font. And this looks pretty much all right. Maybe the text is a little bit too long. We're just going to remove this, and now it should be all right. So now let's create a get started button and a learn more button, for example. So we are basically going to create a button of type button, and this one says get started, and the second one says learn more, for example, or this one could say about us, and the other one says learn more. So now we have those two buttons, which are really looking terrible. So we are going to define a general button style for both of these buttons. And then we use two different classes to define the background colors and the style of our button. So first of all, we're going to create the general button style for a button. And we are going to say that a button has a padding of 10 pixels top bottom and maybe 40 pixels left right. And a button has a border radius of maybe 10 pixels, a cursor of pointer, and a white space of no wrap. Now we can use this button class and give our button class, or both of our button classes, this class dot button. And now we basically have those basic button styles, still looking terrible, so we are going to adjust this. I also think that we are now going to create dot button light, and we are going to create dot button dark. So we have a light and a dark button, and our light button will have this background color, and the other one is going to have the other background color. So we'll use background hashtag and this color, and for the other one we are going to use the dark button color, which is also in my info.txt. So we use background hashtag, and now we have this background color. So let's also use text color, which should also just be the text color from our info.txt, which is hashtag, yeah, whatever. And here we are actually going to use the exact same color. So we save this. And now we can give our left button the button dark class, for example, and the other one is going to get the button light class. So we now have one light and one dark button, which should look like this once we save. And I also don't really like the border, so we're going to get rid of this one for both of these styles. And I'm also removing the border inside of button dark and button light twice. And I think first of all I'm also going to use about us written capital and learn more written capital. And now I have those styles, and now I might also use a slightly bigger font weight. Maybe I'm going to try 400. 400 is normal, so I'm going to try 600. 600 looks a little bit better to me, so I'm going to go with 600, and a font size of maybe, let's try 20 pixels. That's way too big, so we're going to try 16 probably. 16 is a little bit better, but yeah, still too big to me, so I'm going to use 500 right here. Yeah, let's go with 600 and a font size of 15. And I'm also going to use a letter minus spacing of 0.1 characters. And now we have this effect, which is okay to me. We're going to save this, we're going to paste this in right here, and now we have this effect as well. And now we obviously would need some margin to the top for both of our buttons. So we're going to wrap our buttons inside of a div. We are going to say we want to use the class MT, let's say 20 pixels. We don't have this class yet, so we're going to create MT2 for a margin top of 20 pixels. Now we have this margin. Now we also might want to use a gap between those buttons. So we're going to use flex and gap -2 for those buttons as well. And now we have this effect. And I think this looks pretty much all right. And maybe we should also change the general button style, because probably we have a little bit too much padding right here, and maybe we can add some padding right there. Let's go to 12 pixels. And I think this looks kind of alright. So let's go ahead, and once we hover over the button, let's turn the light button into a dark button and vice versa. So we're going to use button minus light. And now we're going to say, once we hover, we're just going to paste the dark button effects in here, or we're just going to say, okay, background should probably be different. So we're going to do this. So now we have this effect. And I'm also going to add a transition, all E 0.5 seconds and ease. And now we have this transition, which is kind of cool to me. And now we can do the exact same thing for our dark button by going dot button minus dark, colon hover. And we are going to copy the background color of our light button. We're going to paste it in here, and we'll set our transition to all 0.5 seconds ease. And now we should have the exact same effect for the other button, just with a different color. So now let's go ahead and create two boxes right below this div. I'm going to create a div, and inside of this div I'm going to create another div that has the class of box. Inside of this box I'm going to create another h2, and this one says, for example, why us question mark, and then we have a paragraph, lorem, maybe 15 words. And now we will just use the exact same box a second time, and we'll probably have our offer. And now we have those two boxes right here, which are still looking terrible and are actually not even in the right place, if you want to say so, because we want to paste them in right above our buttons, because it obviously belongs into this section. So let's go and style our cards. First of all, let's go to our .card section, give it a background color of our light button. So we are just going to copy this background color. Let's also use a padding of maybe 15 pixels, a border radius of maybe 10 or 15 pixels. And now let's take a look at them. They are still looking terrible because somehow okay, I don't have box, I have card. So yeah, I'm just going to rename this one to box, and now the styles should be applied. As you can see, they basically are. Let's also use a width for our boxes because they're way too big and I don't want them to be that big. So I'm going to use probably 150 pixels like so. And this is maybe a little bit too narrow, so I'm going to go with 180 pixels. And I also want to have a slightly smaller font. So I'm going to use class of font minus MD for that one. And this looks a little bit better. And now I'm also going to create .font minus SM because I want to have a pretty small font for our text inside of the class. So I'm going to rename MD to SM, and I'll say we want to have 15 pixels for our small font, for example. And I use font minus SM for our paragraph. And now it basically looks like this. Also, I think I'm going to go with thin. And now we have those thinner texts. I also think the placeholder text is a little bit too much, so you gotta keep it a little bit shorter right here. Let's also add a margin top to our paragraph of maybe MT1. We also have to create .MT1 by copy and pasting that one, and we'll say we want to have 10 pixels of margin to the top. So now we have a little bit of margin. I also think inside of our box we could use some more padding, maybe of 30 pixels, and I think this looks a lot better. Maybe 30 is just a little bit too much. Maybe we're going to use 20, and I think this looks a lot better already. So let's go and create the exact same box once again. So we're just going to replace that box with the other box, and now we should have the exact same box. We are going to say our offer right here, and inside of this div I want to use class flex and gap -2. So now our boxes should look pretty good, and we obviously also need a margin top of maybe, let's use MT3. So we're going to create MT3 for now and say those are 30 pixels to the top, and now we have this effect. So now we also have those boxes. And actually, I think it would probably look a little bit better even if our box would be slightly bigger. So we're going to try that, 250 pixels, for example. And let's just add some more text. So we're going to use lorem 5, and we're again going to use lorem 5 to create some more placeholder text. And this might be a little bit too much, 220, so this is just like testing a little bit, and I think this looks pretty good. So this is what our website could look like. So now we are also going to add a cool hover effect and a cool selected effect for our anchor text inside of our navbar. So we're going to go into our navbar, and this one should have an href to the index.html file, so I'm going to use this one, and now we are going to go to our navbar anchor tag and select every anchor tag that has the href equals index.html attribute. We are going to say that we want to have a background of white, and actually this one should be alright. We are going to style the rest in a different way. We give every single element a padding of 10 pixels top bottom, 15 pixels left right, and a border radius of 30 pixels. For most elements this is going to be invisible, but for those elements with a background it will be visible. So maybe I'm also like going to use 25 and 8 pixels right here. So now this is the effect, and now we want to use, maybe I think 25 is a little bit too much, I'm going to use 20. This one looks pretty good, and now I'm going to create a hover effect on every single nav element. And now our nav element, once we hover, will have a background of white as well. So now this is what it basically looks like. And I also think the gap is a little bit too much now since we added some padding as well. So I'm going to change our gap of 8 to gap of 6. And obviously we need to create a gap of 6 and add the class for that purpose. So I'm going to use gap -6. And this is going to have 60 pixels. And now we have this effect. And I think this navbar looks pretty good already. So let's also add our social icons at the left bottom. And we can do so by going to the bottom of our header. And we are going to say we are going to create a div for our socials. Now we are going to create an anchor inside. And inside of this anchor, we'll use an image. And this image is basically pointing to our images folder, and we're going to start with our Instagram.svg. We're going to save this. We'll give our image a class of socials -icon, because there's going to be the socials icon. I'm going to go inside of our style shield, and I'm going to target our .socialIcons class. I'm going to say this one has a width of 50 pixels. And now it looks like this. Maybe 50 is actually a lot. And we are going to try 30 like this. And this looks pretty good to me. And now we are also going to create some more icons by duplicating this anchor tag. Maybe the second one is for YouTube.svg and the third one is for Discord.svg. And now we could also say that our socials container, we're going to save this. We have those 3 icons. And now we could, for example, say that our socials container, our header, first of all, has a position of relative, and our .socials will have a position of absolute, to position it absolute to our container. And let's say we have bottom 0, left 0. So now we have this effect. I'm also not entirely sure why we have this weird border at the bottom, because usually this should not be the case. Also, for our anchor text, we're going to use target equals underline blank. We're going to take this one and give this attribute to our other 2 anchor texts as well. And now we are going to go into our style sheet, and let's say we want to use 20 pixels left and 20 pixels bottom, and we'll use opacity of maybe 0.6. And now we have this effect. Okay, this seems to be a reason because our anchor tags have an underline. So I'm going to target our socials, and every anchor inside of our socials, I'm going to say text decoration of none. So now they're basically removed. And now we have this effect. I still think this doesn't really look perfect, so I'm maybe going to go with 15 pixels and 15 pixels. I'm also going to create maybe more opacity. Maybe I'm going to use 0.8. Instead of 30, I'm going to use 34 pixels. And now this looks a little bit better. I'm also going to, maybe I'm going to use 0.3 to just make a subtle effect. Maybe even 0.2. Obviously, you can choose cooler icons. They're not like a 10 out of 10, but to me they look kind of right. So I'm going to try and use them. I'm also going to go into our index.html. I'm going to use a flexbox and a gap of maybe 1. I don't think that we have this gap yet, so we're going to create gap -1, and we'll say that this gap has 10 pixels of gap. So now we have this effect. We removed the other class, which was the social class, which should obviously not happen, and now this should work. And actually I think 30 pixels for the individual socials is probably a little bit too much, so I'm going to use 30. And I think this looks kind of right. Also, the gap might be a little bit too big, so I'm just going to remove those classes as well. And I think this looks pretty much alright. And this is the finished site.